People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
That was Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito making clear that he believes the United States, a country that has a constitution that says that we need to have a separation between church and state, needs to return to godliness. Now, he also expressed concern over the challenges of living with ideological opponents in peace due to fundamental differences that both sides have. He feels that they can't be compromised. Now, before we listen to that part of the conversation, a little bit of background on where this report is coming from, because Justice Alito was secretly recorded during this conversation. The conversation took place during the Supreme Court Historical Society's annual dinner that took place on June 3rd. And he's speaking to a friend of ours, someone we've actually worked with before, full disclosure, journalist Lauren Windsor from Undercurrent. So she attended this dinner as a dues-paying member of the society under her real name. But obviously she did so in order to do her reporting. And so she's posing as a religious conservative as they converse. Some, like Sunny Hostin, for instance, on The View, had a problem with her method of this type of reporting. And so we can have a conversation about that. But first, let's go to the video.
As a Catholic and as someone who really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of winning.
I think you're probably right. I think one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. Really can't be compromised. So it's not like we're going to split the difference.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that the solution really is winning the moral argument. People in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
Now, obviously, his statements have ruffled some feathers on the left. There's been a lot of media coverage of this secretly recorded conversation. And I do want to just provide a juxtaposition to the Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, because Chief Justice John Roberts was also having a conversation with Lauren Windsor at the same event, and he handled the conversation a little differently. Let's watch.
But you don't think there's a role for the court in guiding us toward a more moral path?
No, I think the role for the court is deciding the cases. If I start, would you want me to be in charge of guiding us toward a more moral path? That's for the people we elect. That's not for lawyers.
Well, I guess I believe that the founders were godly, we're Christians, and I think that we live in a Christian nation, and that our Supreme Court should be guiding us in that path.
Yeah, I don't know that we live in a Christian nation. I know a lot of Jewish and Muslim friends who would say maybe not, and it's not our job to do that. It's our job to decide the cases as best we can.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
So notably, there is a big difference between Samuel Alito and John Roberts. Chief Justice Roberts clearly takes his role very seriously and doesn't feel that we are a so-called Christian nation, which is an important thing for him to believe as a Supreme Court justice, as the Chief Justice. But I have to be honest, I was not surprised by anything Alito had to say. In fact, I kind of already knew. I think most people who follow politics already knew that this is who Alito is. This is what he represents. And this is why it's important to have a government that has a system of checks and balances, so no one individual can have so much influence as to go against what the country is supposed to be about, or what our Constitution is supposed to protect, which in this case is the separation of church and state. What do you think, Was?
So it's so funny listening to the audio of those two justices, because if I'm not one of these I don't claim to be one of these Supreme Court buffs or scholars, certainly not. But if you pay even a little bit attention to the reputations of both of these guys, John Roberts' audio is literally right on the nose of this, middle of the road, down the line, so, basically centrist, moderate judge. That's his reputation. And that audio is so perfectly illustrative of what his rep is. It's kind of hilarious, honestly, that he did that. Now, the Alito thing, one, obviously we know he's one of the quote unquote conservative judges on the court. He is known to be a conservative Catholic, which if you know Catholic people, these are the people that are railing against abortions and sex before marriage and all of that kind of stuff. Actually trying to adhere very strictly to the book. And that's where that's what that conference was actually about. And look, if you actually pay attention to the decisions these people have made in the court, everybody kind of understands that's how this guy feels. However, traditionally, it's damn near impossible to get Supreme Court justices on the record about their actual politics. True. If you were to actually look at, say, the confirmation hearing of Judge Alito, they tried to pin him down. How do you feel about abortion? How do you feel about gun rights? How do you feel? They tried, okay? A lot of these senators or lawyers, they try to get these guys to state on the record their politics, and they don't do it. I think the bigger thing for me is that this guy is a bit of a kook. Just the fact that some rando can come up to you in this conference and get you to say this out loud is insane. And and not to get all patriarchal, and the thing with the flag is come on, you can't get your wife in line, tell your wife yo, I got a pretty important job. You can't be doing this.
His wife is super spicy. She was also secretly recorded. I didn't want to get into it because she's the wife and I don't really feel the need to focus on that too much. But
she got to get reined in, Anna.
It became clear to me that she's the one who's flying the flags. Okay, she's letting the freak flag fly, and she's the one who's getting into this conflict with the neighbors. And her husband's trying to get her to stop, and she seems a little bit uncontrollable in that situation, which it's to the detriment of Alito because this is about his public reputation. And to your point, it is incredibly difficult to get Supreme Court justices to speak openly and honestly about themselves and their beliefs in public. And so the way they handle those hearings, very different from the candid nature of what Alito was saying as he was speaking to Lauren Windsor in that secretly recorded audio. But what I also thought was interesting is Lauren Windsor provided an example of how much more measured Alito was when she was secretly recording him last year. And so it seems like he has grown increasingly frustrated over things that are happening in this country. And there is increasing polarization that I'm really beginning to believe is partly drummed up and manufactured by media. Because when you really sit down and look at the polling on how Americans feel on a lot of different political issues, there's a lot of agreement on the left and the right on things like corruption, on things like fixing our broken healthcare system. There might be some minor differences, but overall, there's actually a lot of agreement. But it's not interesting or entertaining to watch a newscast about how the American voters are actually getting along and there's no conflict. So manufacturing a lot more conflict, a lot more scandal, a lot more drama, I think has actually been detrimental to the country, to the voters of this country, and in turn, the outcome of our political elections as well.
Yeah, I think the polarization is actually occurring between us and the elites. And the news media, the elite news media, which basically is just an apparatus of the power structure. Like they're just a branch off of the tree when it comes to elite corporate media. They can't cover it that way. It's like, well, most Americans actually see it this way. And this very tiny, very, outsized in their influence group of people see it a completely different way. And I would argue you could make that case even amongst, say, like Jews and their beliefs as far as how the war is being prosecuted in Palestine. Like hyper elite Jews are like, yeah, I'm actually super into what you guys are doing. Like rank and file Jews probably don't. They're not in lockstep with the way that the elite structure sort of sees things. And I would say we could point to that in a myriad of issues amongst our citizenry. But again, it's not interesting for CNN or MSNBC to cover it that way. They gotta go to diners in Kansas and pretend that these people are freaking freaks and the normies are actually in New York City at the freaking MoMA.
It's such a good point. I mean, the treatment of ordinary Americans, the way that ordinary Americans are represented in cable news is pretty disgusting, right? And yeah, I totally agree with you on that. But there are some people who have been really deeply influenced by this reporting, including former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, who decided to rescind her previous support for Alito, which is interesting. She didn't rescind her support after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, but she rescinded her. I think Lauren Windsor does great reporting. I'm not trying to take away from that. I don't think that there was anything really that big here. This is who Alito is, and he's kind of shown us who he is time and time again. But nonetheless, here's Whitman talking about her decision to rescind her support.
Does this make you see him differently or regret your support?
Absolutely, without question. I mean, I was willing to support him because I look back at his record. And when I was appointing justices, particularly to the Supreme Court or any of the judges, what I looked for is how many times had they been overturned? Did they write clear opinions? And were they able to judge cases based on the facts presented to them in that case? Unfortunately, since he's gone to the Supreme Court, that's just seemed to have gone by the wayside.
All right, so if you're wondering why do we care what a former governor of New Jersey has to say, well, she's actually the person who introduced Alito during his 2006 confirmation hearing and even recommended him to the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I think she's just trying to clear her record and engage in some mea culpa, right? Without, I think she just feels bad that she endorsed him and she just wants to clear the record on that. So what do you think, Waz?
I mean, I think if I could have a conversation with Samuel Alito, I'd try to pin him down on when exactly it was America as a state was this godly. Was it when we were massacring and genociding the Native Americans or enslaving Negroes? Or, was it when we started pursuing our empire and, overthrowing all kinds of governments, bombing the hell out of Southeast Asia? Like, when the hell were we a godly country? I'd really like to know.
I mean, there's some pretty violent stuff in the Bible, so
yeah,
checks out.
I guess,
checks out. Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.